everyone, welcome back for chapters 11 and 12 of Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. This is a rare video without any cats in it so far. I must have done something to offend the fickle creatures. During the first quarter of each home game, Stargirl went over to the visitors section and gave them a cheer. She began with an exaggerated ball bouncing motion. Dribble, dribble, sis, boom, bibble. We don't bite, we don't nibble. We just say, howdy, friends, we're the electrons. Who are you? A couple of visiting cheerleaders, maybe a fan or two, would call back Wildcats or Cougars or whatever, but most of them just gaped at her as if to say, who is this? Some of her fellow cheerleaders were amused. Some were mortified. At that point, the only crime Stargirl could have been accused of would be corniness, but she didn't stop there. She cheered whenever the ball went in the basket, regardless of which team shot it. It was the strangest sight. The other team scores, the MAHS crowd sits glumly on their hands, while Stargirl alone pops up cheering. At first, the other cheerleaders tried to suppress her. It was like trying to calm down a puppy. When they gave her the pleated skirt, they made a cheerleader they never imagined. She did not limit herself to basketball games. She cheered anyone, anything, anytime. She cheered the big things, honors, election winners, but gave most of her attention to little things. You never knew when it would happen. Maybe you were a little ninth grade nobody named Eddie. As you're walking down the hall, you see a candy wrapper on the floor. You pick it up and throw it in the nearest trash can. And suddenly, there she is in front of you, pumping her arms, her honey hair and freckles flying, swallowing you whole with those enormous eyes, belting out a cheer like she's making up on the spot. Something about Eddie in the trash can teaming up to wipe out litter. A mob is gathering, clapping hands in rhythm, more eyes on you than all the previous days of your life combined. You feel foolish, exposed, stupid. You want to follow the candy wrapper into the trash can. It's the most painful thing that's ever happened to you. Your brain keeps squirting out a single thought. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And so, when she finally finishes and her freckles settle back onto the bridge of her nose, why don't you just die? Because they're clapping for you. That's why. And whoever heard of dying, well, they're clapping for you. And they're smiling at you. People who never even saw you before are smiling at you and slapping your back and pumping your hand, and suddenly it seems like the whole world is calling your name, and you're feeling so good you pretty much float on home from school. And when you go to bed that night, the last thing you see before you zonk out are those eyes, and the last thing on your face is a smile. Or maybe you showed up at school with really unusual earrings, or you aced a test, or you broke your arm, or you got your braces off. Or maybe you weren't even a person. Maybe you were a charcoal drawing on the wall done by an art whiz, or a really neat looking bug out by the bike rack. We wagged our heads and agreed what a goofy girl this was, maybe even officially crazy, but we walked away smiling, and maybe not saying, but all thinking the same thing. It felt good to get credit. And if this had been any other year, things might have just gone on and on like that. But this was the year something unbelievable was happening on the basketball court. And the year the team was winning. Only winning. And that changed everything. Early in the season, no one noticed. Except for girls' tennis, we never had good teams in anything. We expected to lose. We were comfortable with losing. In fact, most of us were oblivious to it since we didn't even attend the games. The year before, the basketball Electrons had won only 5 of 26 games. This year, they won their 5th game before Christmas. By early January, they had won the 10th, and people began to notice that there was still a 0 in the loss column. Undefeated, blared a sign on the plywood roadrunner. Some said we were winning by accident. Some said the other teams were simply more rotten than we were. Some thought the sign was a joke, but one thing was certain. Attendance went up. By the start of February, the winning streak had reached 16, and there wasn't an empty seat in the gym. But something even more interesting was happening. Suddenly, we were no longer comfortable with losing. In fact, we forgot how to lose. The transformation was stunning in its speed. There was no apprenticeship period, no learning curve. No one had to teach us how to be winners. One day, we were bored, indifferent, satisfied losers. The next, we were rabid fanatics, stomping in the grandstand, painting our faces green and white, doing the wave as if we had been perfecting it for years. We fell in love with our team. When we spoke of it, we used the word we instead of they. The leading scorer, Brent Ardsley, seemed to have a golden glow about him as he moved through the school. And the more we loved our team, the more we hated the opposition. We used to envy them. We even applauded them to spite our own hapless teams. Now we detested the opposition and everything about them. We hated their uniforms. We hated their coaches and their fans. We hated them because they were trying to spoil our perfect season. We resented every point scored against us. And how dare they celebrate? We began to boo. It was our first experience as booers, but you'd have thought we were veterans. We booed the other team. We booed the other coach. We booed the other fans. The referees, whatever threatened our perfect season, we booed it. We even booed the scoreboard. We hated games that went down to the wire. We hated suspense. We loved games that were decided in the first 5 minutes. We wanted more than victories. We wanted massacres. The only score we would have been totally happy with would have been 100-0. And right there in the middle of it all, in the midst of this perfect season mania, was Stargirl popping up whenever the ball went through the net, no matter which team scored, cheering everything and everybody. It was sometime in January when the calls started flying from the stands. "Sit down!" Then came the boos. She didn't seem to notice. She did not seem to notice. Of all the unusual features of Stargirl, this struck me as the most remarkable. Bad things did not stick to her. Correction, her bad things did not stick to her. Our bad things stuck very much to her. If we were hurt, if we were unhappy or otherwise victimized by life, she seemed to know about it and care as soon as we did. But bad things falling on her, unkind words, nasty stares, foot blisters, she seemed unaware of. I never saw her look in a mirror, never heard her complain. All of her feelings, all of her attentions flowed outward. She had no ego. The 19th game of the basketball season was played at Red Rock. In previous years, cheerleaders had outnumbered Micah fans at away games. Not now. The convoy rolling across the desert that evening stretched for a couple of miles. By the time we were seated, there was barely room for the home team fans. It was the worst slaughter of the year. Red Rock was helpless. By the start of the fourth quarter, we were ahead, 78-29. The coach put in the subs. We booed. We smelled 100 points. We wanted blood. The coach put the starters back in. As we howled and thundered in the stands, Stargirl got up and walked from the gym. Those of us who noticed assumed she was going to the restroom. I kept glancing toward the exit. She never returned. With 5 seconds left in the game, the Electrons scored the 100th point. We went nuts. Stargirl had been outside the whole time, chatting with the bus driver. The other cheerleaders asked her why she left. She said she felt sorry for the Red Rock players. She felt her cheering was only making the massacre worse. Such games were no fun, she said. Your job isn't to have fun, they told her. Your job is to cheer for Micah High no matter what. She just stared at them. The team and the cheerleaders rode the same bus. When the players came out from the locker room, the cheerleaders told them what happened. They devised a trick. They told Stargirl that someone had forgotten something in the gym, and would she please go get it. With Stargirl gone, they told the bus driver everyone was aboard, and the bus made the 2-hour return trip without her. A Red Rock custodian drove her home that night. Next day in school, the cheerleaders told her it was all a big misunderstanding and acted as if they were sorry. She believed them. The next day was February 13th, the hot seat. Chapter 12. This is how Hot Seat went. It took place in the Communications Center studio. There were 2 chairs on the stage, the infamous hot seat itself, painted red with flames running up the legs, and an ordinary chair for the host, Kevin. Off to the side were 2 rows of 6 chairs each, the second row higher than the first. This was where the jury sat. It was a jury in name only. The 12 members did not vote or render a verdict. Their job was to ask questions, to give the hot seat its heat. Ticklish questions, embarrassing questions, nosy questions, but not mean or hurtful questions. The idea was to make the subject squirm, not roast. In the spirit of mock inquisition, we called the subject the victim. And why would anyone want to be the victim? The lure of TV. The chance to confess, or lie, before a camera, and before peers instead of parents. But I doubted the usual reasons applied to Stargirl. There were 3 cameras, one for the stage, one for the jury, and Chico. Chico was the handheld close-up camera. According to Mr. Robineau, our faculty advisor, a student named Chico once begged him to be a close-up camera kid. Mr. Robineau gave him a tryout, but Chico was so skinny he practically collapsed under the camera. The job went to someone else, and Chico went to the weight room. By the following year, Chico had muscles, and the camera was like nothing on his shoulder. He got the job, and he was brilliant at it. He gave the camera his own name. "We are one," he said. When he graduated, his name stayed behind, and from then the close-up camera and its operator were a unit called Chico. The host and the victim were each fitted with a thimble-sized clip-on mic. The jury passed around a hand mic. Opposite the stage was the glassed-in control room, sound insulated from the rest of the studio. That's where I worked, wearing my headset, watching the monitors, directing the shots. I stood at the shoulder of the technical director, or TD. He sat at a rack of buttons, punching up the shots I ordered. Also in the control room were the graphics and audio people. Mr. Robino was there as faculty overseer, but basically the students worked everything. Kevin's job was to get things started. Intro the victim, ask a few opening questions, stir things up if the jury was slow. Usually the jury was on the ball. Typical questions. Does it bother you that you're so short? Is it true that you like so-and-so? Do you wish you were good-looking? How often do you take a shower? It almost always added up to entertainment. At the end of the half hour, we cued credits and music. There was always a good feeling in the air, and everyone, victim, jury members, studio crew, mingled and became students again. We filmed the shows after school, then broadcast them that night, prime time, on local cable. About 10,000 homes. Our own surveys said at least 50% of the student body watched any given show. We outdrew most of the hot sitcoms. We expected to top 90% for the Stargirl show. But I had a secret. I wished no one would watch. In the month since we had scheduled the show, Stargirl's popularity had dropped out of sight. Gone were ukuleles from the lunchroom. More and more, kids saw her cheerleading behavior as undermining the basketball team and its perfect record. I was afraid the booze for her might spread from the court to the studio. I was afraid the show might turn ugly. When Stargirl came in that day after school, Kevin gave her the usual briefing while Mr. Robino and I checked the equipment. As the jury members straggled in, they were not clowning around or tap dancing on the stage as jurors usually did. They went straight to their seats. Stargirl was the only one tap dancing and mugging for the cameras with Cinnamon the rat licking her nose. Kevin was cracking up, but the faces of the jurors were grim. One of them was Hillary Kimball. My bad feeling got worse. I retreated to the control room and shut the door. I checked communications with the cameras. We were ready. Kevin and Stargirl took their seats. I took one last look through the plate glass that separated the set from the control room. For the next half hour, I would see the world through 4 monitors. "Okay, everybody," I announced. "Here we go." I cut the studio mic. I looked over my control room mates. "We all set?" Everyone nodded. Just then, Stargirl lifted one of Cinnamon's front paws and waved it at the control room and said in a squeaky voice, "Hi, Leo." I froze. I came unraveled. I didn't know she knew my name. I just stood there like a dummy. Finally, I waggled my fingers at the rat and mouthed the words, "Hi, Cinnamon," although they couldn't hear me on the other side of the glass. I took a deep breath. "Okay, ready music, ready intro." I paused. Music, intro. This was the moment I lived for, launching the show. I was the director, the maestro. I called the shots. On the monitors before me, I watched the program unfold according to my commands. But on this day, the thrill was missing. I felt only a dark dread snaking along the cables. "Greetings, and welcome to Hot Seat." Kevin went through the opening spiel. Kevin loved to be on camera. He was ideal for a show like this, which made good use of his smirky grin and arching, "Did I really hear you say that?" eyebrows. He turned to Stargirl. Then, impromptu, he reached out and stroked the nose of Cinnamon, who was perched on Stargirl's shoulder. "Want to hold him?" she said. Kevin gave the camera a, "Should I look?" "Sure," he said. "Ready, Chico?" "Rat," I said into my headset mic. Ready was always first in the command sequence. Chico zoomed in. "Chico." TD punched up Chico. The camera followed Cinnamon from Stargirl's hands to Kevin. No sooner was the rat in Kevin's lap than it scampered up his chest and darted between 2 buttons into his shirt. Kevin yipped and squirmed. "It scratches." "He has fingernails," Stargirl said calmly. "He won't hurt you." Chico nailed Cinnamon, poking his head out from between the 2 buttons. Mr. Robino stuck a thumbs up in front of my face. Kevin gave the camera his "ain't I something" face. He turned again to Stargirl. "You know, ever since you showed up at school this year, we've been wanting to put you on the hot seat." Stargirl stared at him. She turned to the live camera. Her eyes were growing wider. Something was happening. And wider. "Chico!" I barked. Chico moved in, crouching. giving it a little upshot. Terrific. Closer. Closer, I said. Stargirl's wonder-struck eyes practically filled the screen. I checked the long-shot monitor. She was frozen, rigid, as if electrified to the chair. Someone smacked my shoulder. I turned. Mr. Robineau was laughing, saying something. I lifted one earphone. She's joking, he repeated, and suddenly I saw. She was taking hot seat, literally. She was milking it. For all it was worth, and judging from the blank stares of Kevin and the jury, Mr. Robineau and I were the only ones who got the joke. Stargirl's hands were rising now from the arms of the hot seat. Ready, one? I called. One. Camera one, not there at first, but getting it now, the long shot, nailing her as her hands came off the chair arms, fingers spread wide. You could almost see her fingertips smoking. Hold it, I prayed. Hold it. As her horrified eyes swung down over the side of the chair, the hot seat saw the painted flames. Yikes! Her scream bent instrument dials like palms in a hurricane. The rat leaped from Kevin's shirt. The TV image quaked as my camera one man flinched, but he recovered and caught her standing now on the front edge of the stage, bending over with her rear end in the camera, flapping her hand behind her, fanning her smoking fanny. Finally, Kevin got it. He went nuts. One, pull back. Get Kevin in it. Ready? One. Kevin was doubled up, tipping out of his chair, on his knees on the stage. His laughter flooded the control room. The rat ran over his hands and hopped down the single step. The rat! I yelled. Two, get the rat! But Two couldn't get the rat because the rat was nosing around Two's feet and Two was bolting from his camera. Chico! Rat! Chico dived. He was flat on the floor, feeding the live screen a brilliant shot of the rat heading over to the jury members scrambling, taking off, climbing onto their seats. Forget the readies. Things were happening too fast. The cameras were dancing, feeding the monitors. I barked commands. TD was punching his button rack like some hard rock keyboarder. Stargirl's pantomime remains the best I have ever seen. Mr. Robineau kept squeezing my shoulder. As he said later, it was the greatest moment in hot seat history. But because of what followed, no audience would ever see it. That brings us right through the end of chapter 12. I hope you are as anxious as I am to find out what's going to happen next. See you soon.